Imagine that all of a sudden, your life seems to start falling apart. You discover your boyfriend's betrayal and believe that this isn't the first time. Wanting to get revenge, you promise to go out with the first man who appears in front of you, and coincidentally, the same man who had a disagreement earlier on the subway is the one who appears. Continuing your revenge, you invite him to spend the night with you, and the man accepts. Your ex-boyfriend can't believe what he's seeing, and his goal has been achieved. However, in the future, when you start an internship with the prosecutor's office, you discover that the man will be your boss for 2 months, and another streak of bad luck begins. This period brought her complications, such as her ex-boyfriend's body appearing lifeless in her apartment. Without an alibi and with witnesses saying that you clearly must have done this, having already said several times that you would take his life, how will you prove your innocence? I'm Nina and today's recap will be Suspicious Partner. The story begins with our protagonist inside the subway. Unfortunately, a man put his hand on her, and Bang Hee, believing it was the one on her left side, started cursing. The protagonist asks the man who was on her right side to call the police, and in fact, this is the person who committed the act and was unharmed. Everyone in the transport despises Ji-wook's attitude, even though it wasn't him, and the man even ends up missing the stop he was going to get off at because of Bang Hee, who didn't let Ji-wook through the door. Because of the confusion, the protagonist had even forgotten for a moment why she had taken the subway. Earlier, she received an anonymous message. It was someone telling her that her boyfriend was in a hotel with another woman. Going back to now, when Bang Hee arrives at this hotel, she discovers that whoever sent her the message wasn't lying. The man really is cheating on her. Your boyfriend seems to have no regrets for what he did, his posture, or the way he speaks. He says that the man is just repeating the cliché of someone who is caught cheating, saying that despite everything, I love you very much, and I won't do it anymore, and these things. The protagonist already suspected that something like this was happening due to the fact that he took a long time to respond to her messages and that the passenger seat of his car was always different from the position in which she had left it. Angry, Bang Hee tells her boyfriend that she will be the one to say when they will break up and that to make things even, the woman will also go out with a man, since he claimed that he did this kind of thing because he was young and couldn't hold on. The protagonist says that she will sleep with the first person she finds, and at that moment, Ji-wook stops next to the woman, and she extends the invitation. Because she lost a contact lens, Bang Hee doesn't recognize him at first, but as soon as she realizes, she just wants to get out of there, leaving her boyfriend's ego hurt, so she ignores for a moment what happened earlier on the subway. The two leave the place hugging, and Hee-jun believes that his girlfriend is really going to do what she said. Outside, Bang Hee listens to what Ji-wook wanted to tell her about being unfairly accused of being a pervert, and the man even gives her some more help. As soon as her boyfriend starts to approach, Ji-wook leaves for the protagonist to get into the taxi together, so Hee-jun thinks they will leave together. Inside the vehicle, the protagonist apologizes for having accused him earlier and invites him to have a drink together. However, Ji-wook refuses, and Bang Hee is left at an establishment. Later, Ji-wook returned to the establishment and agreed to drink with the protagonist. In the next scene, it's the next day, and Bang Hee is at the man's house. She doesn't remember everything that happened the night before, but some stray images come back to her mind, like one where the woman is hitting on her, of Ji-wook on the couch at his house. The protagonist was very ashamed of the things she did and decided to leave the residence without saying goodbye, just leaving a note with an apology. Now we see Ji-wook driving. He is on call with Young-hee. This man is considered a father figure to Ji-wook, as he lost his father when he was little, but for the short time he lived, he was greatly admired for his son. Young-hee was on a date with him at the hotel last night and left several missed calls. The man was curious about which ending he got with the protagonist, and he comments that Ji-wook had never been interested in another woman again after the relationship he had with Yoo-young. Going back to the past, we see the possible reason why the man broke up with Yoo-young. One day, when he was arriving at the residence, he came across men's clothes thrown around the house, which were not his, and then he found the woman at the bedroom door, with her lover behind him getting dressed. We see that the reason Ji-wook helped the protagonist the night before was because he heard that she had been cheated on while the woman was yelling at her boyfriend. The man knows what this feeling is like, and that's why he decided to help. As soon as he arrives at work, Ji-wook receives the news that he was nominated as the worst prosecutor, but this doesn't bother him because, according to the man, if the lawyers hate him, it's because he's doing a great job. At the institute where the protagonist is studying to become a lawyer, everyone already knows about the betrayal. However, the roles are reversed. Her ex-boyfriend spread the word that he was the one who betrayed her, and everyone believed him. Even though she is feeling a little alone, Bang-hee has her mother's support. 3 months pass, and we will see when the students will start interning with the prosecutors. There is also another story. Hee-jun started dating the protagonist's rival, Ji-hae. And every time Bang-hee passes them, he sings a song in which the lyrics say that the protagonist curses him and will take his life. Returning to the internship, Bang-hee soon discovers that the prosecutor who will train her is Ji-wook, and a film about the shame she went through in front of him runs through her head. Ji-wook really is a very difficult boss, and the man makes him work non-stop during the time they spend together. When the protagonist begins to interrogate the accused, she comes across the man who had messed with her on the train, and he is accused of doing the same thing again. At that moment, Bang-hee realizes that it really wasn't Ji-wook who had done that day and reprimands him, but in the end, the man is released. The protagonist still has to deal with the couple of the moment, and as imagined, Ji-hae also provokes her. Ji-wook was nearby when the two went to talk to Bang-hee, and they were humiliating her, so the man decided to help her once again, saying that he was in love with her and so on. The ex-boyfriend and rival end up leaving the place, and Ji-wook takes the opportunity to give some advice to the protagonist. He warns her that she should stop singing that song to Hee-jun and forget about him. At night, Bang-hee goes to her house, opens her window a little to get some air, and then goes to a place to buy beer. While she was going, there was a blackout in the neighborhood, and she could only pay for her purchases with cash. Without electricity, the card machines wouldn't work. On the way home, the protagonist passes a man whistling on a bicycle, and she pays attention to the melody, but because it is dark, she hurries to go up to the house. And that's when she comes across a nightmare that will haunt her for a long time. Her ex-boyfriend's body is lying on the floor of her house, and he is already lifeless. With the blackout and no transaction history from the store, Bang-hee has no alibi to prove her innocence. In the next scene, we understand what happened. When the protagonist opened the window, she was without her glasses and therefore couldn't see, but right in front of her, a person was hiding a body. This person thought Bang-hee had seen her, so they decided to go to her apartment and rule out the witness. However, in the place, the one who was there was Hee-jun, who, for some reason, wanted to talk to his ex-girlfriend, and as he knew the password, he simply entered the apartment. So the man ended up losing his life, and the woman was framed for a crime that simply fell into his lap. During the interrogation, Bang-hee already knows that she will be the main suspect in the case and tells the investigators who focus on her that she is innocent and the real criminal, and the evidence will disappear. Unfortunately, the protagonist is arrested. In the next scene, we see Ji-wook remembering a line a monk told him when he was little, that he is destined to have a woman in his life who will destroy her. And then Ji-wook's cell phone rings. It's a call from Bang-hee. The woman tells him what happened and the man goes to jail. The protagonist tells him that she doesn't know what happened, that when she came back, everything was already done, but that she trusts him to solve the case, even though Ji-wook told her not to. The next day, Ji-wook is called to the office of his boss, the big prosecutor, who was Hee-jun's father. The man asks Ji-wook to have the protagonist sentenced to life in prison. If he doesn't do this, he will be fired. Working on Bang-hee's case, Ji-wook realizes that the monk was right. The man still doesn't know what he's going to do, whether he's going to let the protagonist take the blame or whether he's going to work clearly and correctly, even with his job at stake. Anyway, he called Eun-hyuk. The man is a lawyer that Ji-wook is not a big fan of but trusts that he will protect Bang-hee's case well. Later, Ji-wook goes to the crime scene to investigate further. He wants to make sure if the woman is really the perpetrator, and instead, the man discovers the object that was supposedly used, as it is 7 kilometers from the scene. He also finds another, very similar one. Ji-wook decides to take both pieces of evidence to be analyzed and compared with the victim's blood. It will also be seen if there is any different DNA. The man asked the laboratory to do this in the bushes, as it is very likely that someone had planted one of the objects, as the crime scene had been previously reviewed and investigators had not found any weapons. On the day of the trial, the prosecutor finds Bang-hee guilty and says she must serve 15 years in prison. When Eun-hyuk stands up to defend himself, Ji-wook interrupts him and decides to present the 2 weapons that were found in connection with the crime. The prosecutor probably buried his career at that moment, as he argued that as there is the victim's blood on a weapon that was planted at the scene of the crime and another 7 kilometers away, there is no way the protagonist could be accused as the perpetrator. The man decided to do this because his father was a fair and honest prosecutor. He entered the profession after someone took his sister's life and continued his career, distancing himself from political and corrupt prosecutors. The man was a hero to his son and ended up suffering the same fate as his sister, having his life taken by a criminal. So Ji-wook couldn't ignore his origins just to keep his job, and so the man made the choice to take the correct path of judgment. When the protagonist is leaving the court and getting on the bus, she hears someone making a whistle in the same way that happened the night of the crime, and the woman begins to think that the real perpetrator was right there next to her. A few days later, Bang-hee returns to her studies and ends up coming across Ji-wook taking her belongings from her prosecutor's office. The protagonist developed a passion for the man, but because she believes the monk's words, Ji-wook wants to distance herself from her. However, Bang-hee still presents him with tea to help him sleep and says that he doesn't need to worry because she won't bother him anymore. The protagonist comments on the whistle she heard at the end of the trial and on the day of the crime, but soon adds that she will investigate it alone. Later, when he is at home, Hee-jun's father comes to visit. The man went to the place just to bother him, and he talks as if the woman was to blame for what happened to his son and how unfair it is for her to be alive when he isn't. The man still talks about the forged evidence. He doesn't accept that the woman wasn't accused of being guilty, and he almost slapped her when Bang-hee started to defend herself. The man says that he will do everything to ensure that the protagonist is punished and suffers. Meanwhile, Ji-wook has started his new job. He will work at Young-hee's law firm, together with Eun-hyuk, and will have to overcome his dislike for the man. However, Ji-wook made it very clear to him that just because they're talking doesn't mean he'll forget what the man did. The protagonist is committed to finding the real culprit. She even had a banner hung with her number, telling people who saw a bicycle on the day of the blackout to call. 2 years pass, and Ji-wook has his ears pulled by his boss. The man is acting like he's still a prosecutor with clients, and he needs to stop that. Even though he doesn't agree with defending some people, he is now a lawyer, and that's his job. The protagonist even saw him a few times in court but respected the man's request not to speak to each other again. Bang-hee still had some bad luck days, like when the woman ended up breaking her heel and had to go and serve a customer in flip-flops. Sitting in front of an expensive shoe store, the protagonist wished she had money so she could buy them. Since it wouldn't be possible, Bang-hee decides to bother her rival, who was also there. The protagonist took the heels that the woman was wearing and exchanged them for her slippers, then told the shoemaker who was repairing her shoes that Ji-hae would be the one who would pay. In her office, the protagonist received a client who, according to him, was once a stalker of a girl. The man followed her everywhere she could go, and she ended up having to file for a restraining order. The two hadn't crossed paths for a year and a half, but 2 days ago, the client got on a bus, and coincidentally, the girl was there too. He didn't know how she should behave, so he decided to greet her. When he did this, the woman pushed him through the open transport door, which resulted in him breaking his leg and arm. Meanwhile, Ji-wook has the girl as a client, and the woman is sure that the man was on the transport on purpose, suddenly finding out where his work or residence was. Bang-hee and Ji-woo meet in court to defend their clients. The man wants the woman to pay for the treatment and expenses he incurred with his broken bones, but if she doesn't agree, he accepts an agreement in which the woman should just apologize. As the client had said that he would leave the country soon, Bang Hee gets Ji-woo's client to sign the agreement, and soon a meeting between the four is held. As soon as each one is placed inside their taxi, the protagonist thinks that it is strange that her client smiled when they said that he would no longer be able to see his loved one. Then Bang Hee realizes that this was the perfect opportunity for the man to pursue her after the meeting. No one would suspect that he would do it again as soon as he gained the trust of the judge and those involved in the case. The protagonist calls Ji-wook, and the two rush to the woman's address. Meanwhile, unfortunately, Bang Hee was right. The man really abused the trust given to him and chased her home. When the protagonist enters the woman's apartment, she is locked in her room, and the man is at the door with a bat, shouting at her to open it. For a moment, Bang Hee thought the man was going to attack her, but Ji-wook appears next, and it's a relief when he stops him. The police take the client into custody, and later, Ji-wook leaves the protagonist in her office. Instead, the woman notices that on top of her table, there is a box with a pair of shoes that she was admiring the other day but didn't buy because they were too expensive. There is also a message on the lid, which says, "If you keep looking for me, I will find you first." What did you think of these episodes? I hope you liked the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me. Until next time.